This is the M1117 Guardian Armored Security Vehicle, or ASV. It was a major asset in recent wars fought against militias in the Middle East. We'll see how the design and tactics used with the ASV was actually a major turning point for small unit tactics in this region. Today, your average soldier in the American military takes for granted the fact that when he goes into battle, he's going to have an armored vehicle to protect him. This was not always the case. In fact, for a long period of time, generals and commanders were skeptical of the need for widespread adoption of a medium armored vehicle because the thinking was when you're facing down a Soviet army of thousands of tanks, you yourself will require nothing less than a main battle tank. It kind of reminds me of an American version of the Russian BRDM series. Except in the United States, these were never used as much, for reasons that we'll get into later. Just last year, the United States government delivered 250 of the Guardians to Ukraine, and they couldn't have come at a more perfect time. The Guardians were born specifically to thrive in a landmine-rich environment like in the Middle East, or like Ukrainian forces are facing in Eastern Europe today. In fact, many of these ASVs are fresh from the United States military withdrawal from Afghanistan, so much so that some of the vehicles still have desert camo paint jobs, even though they're being transported by rail through Romania into the new conflict zone. So they survived Afghanistan only to be sent straight to Ukraine. And in case you're curious, yes, the Taliban captured at least 51 of these and destroyed another 60 when they retook Afghanistan. But what are the reasons for why the Guardian never fully replaced the Humvee, and are they about to make a major comeback in the Middle East and Eastern Europe today? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Let's find out. Come in, Commander. Do you read me on this network time now?
Yes, I read you Lima Charlie. How do you sound so crystal clear, though?
Oh, that's just thanks to my Raycon Everyday Earbuds, the sponsor of today's video.
Do go on.
Sure. Raycon Everyday Earbuds are my favorite way to listen to music, podcasts, and YouTube channels in oddly specific niches that only I would enjoy. Raycons have made a name for themselves with premium audio products. They've earned tens of thousands of 5-star reviews online, plus they're really affordable so I can actually stash one set in my car, another in my gym bag, because I'm so gosh dang forgetful that I need to hide Raycons everywhere from myself. And now on top of their earbuds and headphones, they offer even more tech greatness with their Raycon home products. Just wait till you try out their bathroom faucet filter water purifier, it's like music to your skin. With Black Friday coming up, Raycon is offering my handsome viewers 20% off their entire site with up to 50% off select items. So get an early start on your holiday shopping this year at Raycon's early Black Friday sale today. Go to buyraycon.com/taskandpurpose to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. The M1117 started life in the 1960s as the Commando series of vehicles built by Cadillac Gage. Military police forces in Vietnam needed a vehicle they could ride around in for base and convoy security that was more nimble than the tracked M113 APC, but better armored than a Jeep or truck. The first version, known as the V100, entered service in 1963 and was shipped to South Vietnam to support the U.S. military police, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Allied Army of the Republic of Vietnam. As a security vehicle armed only with machine guns or a grenade launcher, the V100 wasn't intended for frontline combat, instead patrolling air bases and supply depots, along with escorting convoys behind the lines. But the nature of the conflict in Vietnam meant that the Commando frequently found itself pressed into cavalry and mechanized units of the ARVN. The vehicle's steel armor was only sufficient to stop light machine gun fire and small explosive fragments, but the Commando was still very well liked by its crew, as its height and amphibious capability made it useful for seeing over and traversing the marshy vegetation of South Vietnam. The V100 was upgraded and diversified into several different variants that improved reliability, armor size, and weaponry, yet despite the vehicle's popularity, the Commando wasn't used much by the US military after the Vietnam War. You see, in the 1960s and 1980s, US military doctrine emphasized two distinct types of equipment. You got your tanks and your infantry fighting vehicles, both tracked armored vehicles. In big armies' mind, those were the two vehicles for the frontliniest of combat. Meanwhile, you had your unarmored utility vehicles for transport behind the lines, and really just about any mission that didn't require heavy armor. There was no in-between. There was no compromise. That's the black and white thinking that I expect from all great officers. Through the 1980s and into the 1990s, the American military instead diverted much of the Commando's mission to the Humvee. This might seem like a really strange decision because the Humvee was totally unarmored, and me personally, I wouldn't want to ride into that thing in combat. But it's like my grandfather was always told when he was in the Korean War, ours is not to question why, ours is but to do or die. But I'm going to question it. Why did the US military invest in the Humvee instead? The answer is simple. The Humvee was cheaper, lighter, easier to maintain, and faster, meaning it could be rapidly deployed by air, land, and sea in great numbers. Commanders saw the V-100's light armor as a liability and favored the Humvee's versatility. If you've ever had to deal with motor pool Mondays checking a long list of vehicle maintenance, you might see why troops could choose something that's less safe. Soldiers would rather unironically die in a light-skinned Humvee than have to do the extra work required to maintain a complicated, heavy piece of equipment. This preventative maintenance checks and services can take hours, and it's a real drag. And then, when you look at the evidence on the ground, there was initial combat impressions in Panama and Operation Desert Storm that seemed to favor this way of thinking and reinforce using unarmored Humvees, because the Humvees played a crucial role in those conflicts without suffering heavy losses. Sometimes you can draw bad conclusions from the data though, because over-reliance on unarmored Humvees proved short-sighted. In 1993, in the Battle of Mogadishu, we learned this. What was supposed to be a quick capture operation went awry. Tight urban combat negated much of the Humvee's speed advantage that was useful in Panama and Desert Storm. Meanwhile, the lack of armor meant US forces were vulnerable to small arms fire and grenades from all angles. In response to the disaster in Somalia, the US military developed the up-armored version of the Humvee in 1996, which added armor and bullet-resistant glass along with engine and suspension upgrades. These new up-armored versions served alongside original Humvees during the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan after the September 11th attacks in 2001, with soldiers initially preferring the non-armored versions for speed and better off-road capabilities, because when you're in an invasion part of the war, that's what you want to emphasize. Soldiers even removed armored kits or entire doors from the heavier M114s to enhance their mobility, since many military analysts expected swift victories over the Taliban and Saddam Hussein's military, so every ounce of speed would help achieve those goals. Fortunes quickly reversed though, with both conflicts devolving into protracted counterinsurgency operations that once again saw second-line vehicles under fire. Now, the military couldn't get enough of those up-armored Humvees at this point, but a low supply led to extreme examples of soldiers strapping body armor or other improvised panels to the side of the vehicles. So to answer the call for more protection, the US military brought out the M1117 Guardian, based on the Commando series from Vietnam, which was actually originally designed in 1998 by Textron. The project had been delayed and almost cancelled several times because commanders just didn't see the use for it. That is, until the IED problems in Iraq and Afghanistan. At 14.8 tons, it was lighter than the 18-ton MRAP and was lower to the ground, so there was less risk of rollover, while still giving protection against incoming 50 cal rounds. The secret to the vehicle is its modular expandable armor system called Mexus for short, which is actually a design philosophy seen in many armored vehicles today. The German company IBD Desenroth Engineering and later Rheinmetall worked on this modular armor design. Attached on the top of the steel armored hull, these advanced ceramic tiles work much like ballistic plates in soldier armor, fragmenting and dispersing the energy of incoming rounds, while being much lighter than steel. Combined with a V-shaped hull to channel the blast energy away from the hull and an integrated spall liner inside the crew cabin, it made the Guardian ASV extremely safe to ride in. Okay, here's one way to tell if the vehicle you're assigned to in your unit is a piece of crap or not. This is the CAPI vehicle litmus test, because I won't serve in a vehicle that doesn't pass it. You could tell by whether or not your politicians or high-ranking generals are willing to travel in them. For instance, high-up State Department officials and members of Congress favored traveling inside of Iraq with the M1117 instead of those Humvees. That's probably because the M1117 can withstand 12 pounds of explosives and 50 caliber machine guns instead of the spitballs that your unarmored Humvees can stop. The M1117 Guardian has a max road speed of 63 miles per hour, which is freaking fast as heck for a fully armored vehicle. And it also had a major benefit of holding 8 fully kitted dismounted infantry in the back. Meanwhile, Humvees had to split squads up. Up to 6 combat-ready vehicles can fit in the C-17 Globemaster, or you could have one transported by a massive CH-43 Super Stallion helicopter. Basically, in hindsight, it might have been a good idea to acquire these in large numbers instead of Humvees and MRAPs. But What about the firepower? I want to feel it down in the plums when I fire this thing. In many cases, it has the fully enclosed Mark 19 grenade launcher or a 50 caliber machine gun. The enclosed hull is important because the enemy in Iraq and Afghanistan took to sniping gunners out of the open top turret. There were plans to build a direct fire support variant for the Afghan National Army that added a 90mm gun for added punch and light anti-armor duty. But budget cuts in 2014 saw the program cancelled before any of these upgun versions could be delivered, and in light of the Taliban's eventual takeover of the country, it's probably for the best that things turned out that way. There is a strange story and possible reason having to do with the power of Mother Nature that sheds light on why this vehicle never saw greater numbers. When the Iraq War began in 2003, there were only 53 of these vehicles in US service. The US Army contracted 724 units of the M1117 Guardian ASV in June of 2005, to the tune of $258 million. The contract amount doubled to $500 million the very next month, increasing the number of Guardians on order to over 1,100 vehicles. Textron Marine and Land Systems was the sole source contractor for the procurement and quickly began ramping up production with new equipment. They expanded their factory space and hired 1,100 new workers. Textron's goal was to reach a production target of 48 complete vehicles rolling out of their New Orleans factory every month, which was an ambitious goal for a production line that had previously been at a dead end. But the M1117 and the US war effort suffered an unexpected setback in August of that same year when Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005 and it devastated the New Orleans area. To put it into perspective, the Category 5 hurricane resulted in heavy flooding over 80% of the city, killing over 1,000 people and causing over $140 billion in damage. And the damage done to the Textron factory producing the M1117 was immense, along with many workers rendered homeless. It took 2 months for the factory to resume production, which is an immense feat considering the scale of the disaster. But it wouldn't be until a year later in 2006 that they would finally meet their production target of 48 vehicles a month. This might explain why so many armored vehicle companies today and their production are located inside of Massachusetts away from that hurricane belt. The US Department of Defense started the MRAP program just 2 years later in 2007. 9 separate firms submitted designs for the program, including Textron Marine and Land Systems with their M1117. But for reasons still unknown, the vehicle was removed from the competition. I have a few theories as to why the Guardian was sidelined. It might have failed the explosives test at Aberdeen Proving Grounds because it was the lightest vehicle in the competition. There's less standoff space between the ground and the vehicle, so maybe that's why it didn't perform as well against IEDs. It's also very likely that the fact that the Textron's only factory was still recovering from a major disaster and barely meeting production targets already. Reaching the goal of 8,000 armored vehicles within a short period of time was already stressing production lines that were not dealing with natural disasters. The official reason for the M1117's withdrawal from the program was never publicly unveiled, so it's anyone's guess what truly happened, but with the need for IED-resistant vehicles in the beyond urgent category, it seems likely production capacity played at least some role in the decision. Beyond urgent basically means that they were like, we need to go pedal to the metal with production on these things. We need them yesterday. Despite not scoring any winning contracts for the MRAP competition, the M1117 was still well liked in the combat zone and production would continue. The tactics used with the vehicle were often in specialty roles. The Guardian was like a fine wine, reserved for special occasions. Soldiers praised the vehicle's 360-degree visibility and protection, as well as the better survivability in case of a rollover, which was proving to be a huge problem at the time, with heavier vehicles like the MRAP rolling over and killing many soldiers. One measure of success is how many attempted IED attacks it takes for insurgents to take a soldier out of the fight. At the start of the insurgent phase in Iraq, it only took 4 IED attacks on average to cause a casualty, but by 2011 that rate quadrupled to 20, showing the new vehicles and tactics were having a significant protective effect despite insurgents actually getting better at producing bombs over time. 1,836 M1117 vehicles were eventually produced, and the vehicles continue to serve in the US military until September 2021. But the Guardian story doesn't end there, because Canada, Bulgaria, Colombia, Greece, and Kosovo continue to operate and purchase the vehicle from Textron in standard as well as nation-specific variants. Textron continues to market the vehicle on the international market as a newer Commando family with more versions than ever before. Now, with the 250 donated vehicles in Ukraine, the M1117 will put to the test in major combat operations once again. Russian mines might be better designed than insurgent IEDs, but essentially they serve the same function of denying movement and inflicting passive casualties on Ukrainian troops and equipment. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates that over 170,000 square kilometers, or 60% of the country, has unexploded ordnance still active. Much of it in the form of hidden mines, meaning a quick way to get to and from the front without turning into a shrapnel pincushion will be a welcome addition for the Ukrainian armed forces. The M1117 will likely still play its traditional role of protecting rear areas and convoys from saboteurs and spies, but its potential as an armored reconnaissance vehicle and light transport or some type of cavalry role might be important or critical in this conflict. Prior to the Guardian's delivery, Ukraine relied on old Soviet BRDM-2 vehicles to fulfill these needs, but these are steadily running out from combat losses and attrition as worn-out parts break down. The M1117 Guardian ASV not only boosts Ukraine's number of light tactical vehicles, but also offers much better protection and capabilities than the BRDM to boot. The Guardian ASV tracks a historic period of change in quasi-mechanized infantry doctrine, where the military went from only thinking of armored vehicles as heavy brigade combat teams for armored units, to more medium armored units even in high-intensity conflict, especially because you can't afford to have or maintain enough tracked vehicles, and tracked vehicles aren't right for every high-intensity mission. I'm Chris Cappy, thank you for subscribing and liking this video. We have 2 other options for you here if you're interested, and I'll see you guys again soon.